So, why do people have accents? Well, the short answer is languages can mix and influence each other, or certain sounds aren't available in every language. But to understand that answer, it's going to take a little bit more explaining. Almost everybody has heard an accent before, and if you haven't, you may want to get away from that rock you've been living under. But accents can pretty much come about in two major ways. Either you're getting outside influence from another language that's leaking into your own, or you're getting an accent from you trying to speak outside of your native tongue. Now, the United States is a really good example of that first type of accent. So originally, this piece of land was inhabited by the Native Americans, but when all the colonizers came over from across the pond, they brought their languages and their diseases with them. Now you might be thinking, why doesn't everybody in the US just have a British accent then? Well, hold on just a minute there, bucko, because I'm getting there. As the colonists began to steamroll their way across the North American continent, they spread their language, among other things, with them. And as time passed, settlers from all over the world came to the US to get a little piece of that imperialism pie and started spreading their own language and their own influence all over the US. And kind of similarly to how paint colors would mix together, these new languages, whatever they may be, Spanish, Dutch, Italian, German, started bringing their influence into the English language that was being spoken at the time. And little by little, over many years of integration, little bits and pieces of these languages broke off and sort of made their way into the English that's spoken here today. This might sound like a pretty strange concept when you first hear it, but it's actually not uncommon even in today's standards. In the early stages of quarantine, there were a lot of kids watching a TV show called Peppa Pig, which follows the life of a family of anthropomorphic British pigs. Now, even if these kids had no previous exposure to British accents or culture, they could start developing their own British accents just from watching the show. But back to the US. Over time, these separate groups of different cultures kind of cemented themselves in different areas across the states, and over time, their influence continued to grow until there was eventually small pockets all across the states where, now today, there's very many different regional accents. Now, after hundreds of years of this sort of influence spreading, language has developed to the point where we can have glorious musical linguistics just like this.
Hey, boy say he wanted to get his junk down juggler snack.
Wow. Now, moving on to the second type of accents, those found in people speaking outside of their native tongue. If you start to break down a language to its basic components, you're going to end up with two things. And those are going to be an alphabet and basic rules for pronunciation. Now, as you may have guessed or have seen, not every single language is going to have the same alphabet. But a lot of these languages also have different phonetical sounds for pronunciation. If you grew up speaking, say, English, for example, and you tried to learn another language that has different phonetic sounds and patterns, it's going to be really difficult for you to start learning those, especially if you're doing it later in life. Think trilled R's in Spanish. Going from the English pronunciation to those trilled R's is going to be very difficult if you don't have previous exposure to it. Another good example of this would be a native Japanese speaker trying to learn English. Now, in Japanese, they don't really have a distinction between L's and R's the way that we do in English. So for a native Japanese speaker, they would have a really tough time trying to distinguish between the two and just trying to figure out when to use which one in basic conversation. And for one final example, the Thai language has both aspirated and unaspirated P's. Now in English, we just have the aspirated, which is that little puff sound you make when you say P. To the Thai people, the difference between these two is about as large as the difference between R and L for us, but to a native English speaker, at least I would have no idea and would be totally out of my depth trying to tell the difference between the two. But if you're still interested in learning more about these phonetical quirks and all the different possible pronunciations, check out this video from Tom Scott. It goes super in depth into it, and he has great work as always, so just check it out if you get the chance. So unless you're either super skilled, super disciplined, or you have a child-sized malleable Play-Doh brain, then you're going to have a tough time trying to learn these new phonetic sounds in languages that aren't your original. Anyways, that's all I've got on this topic, but if you have any other burning, unanswered questions that you'd like to see answered, just drop them down in the comments and maybe I'll get to them. But at the very least, now you know why people have accents.